the formal evaluation process is as soul-sucking as the proposal development process. Like, read these words and then write a 100-page report is not the way that acquisition should be done. It's not the way that your like business to business, personal, like life buying decisions are done. So we do need to cut out a lot of the administration, and the software tools are the only way to do that. Greetings, everyone. This is Chris Hamm, your host of the Optimized podcast by VisibleThread. Today, we are actually going to talk about VisibleThread. We have Kyle Peterson here. He leads the customer success team with VisibleThread. And this one's going to be a tad different than the series that we've had so far, because this one, I'm going to play the novice. I'm going to ask questions about something that I didn't even know existed when I was inside of government. So let's get started. Welcome, Kyle. Give me a quick, who are you? How long have you worked there? Like, what's the, why do you do this? Why is this like awesome for you? What's the initial thing here?
Sure. No, thanks for having me, Chris. Really looking forward to joining the conversation. So I've been at VisibleThread since August of 2021. I'm based in Denver, Colorado. Before VisibleThread, I was a contracts manager in the aerospace industry. I actually used VisibleThread in that context. So liked the software so much, eventually I jumped to VisibleThread. So I'm a big believer and advocate of linking technology to process to the entire kind of pre and post award contract lifecycle. And so maybe the only other thing that kind of jumps me out of bed in the morning is really helping customers solve problems, connecting process, technology, people together. Nothing better than seeing our customers win, save time, all that good stuff. So yeah, big customer outcomes advocate.
Right, so, as you know, I used to run an acquisition authority inside of GSA, and the number of actions that I did, the dollar amount was huge, but the number of transactions was relatively limited. There might be like 60 new awards in a year. So like I've never thought about what it would be like on the other side to like try and discern what the world of government contracts is and what is SAM and all that. So you'd said you used it before you came. Like, can you have like how? Like, what was like the first exposure to it, and then you realize, oh wait, I need to use this in order to actually navigate this really weird government acquisition thing?
So I first started using it in 2017. It was purchased by my VP of contracts and commercial at the time. I was at Cobham Mission Systems, kind of aircraft OEM, kind of a mid-tier, second-tier supplier to a Boeing, for instance. And so it was high volume actuation type equipment, oxygen management systems for aircraft, both military and commercial. And so I used it to just do simple kind of contract modifications, comparison reports, what's changed, what's not, whether it's on terms, pricing, cost, schedule, et cetera. The use case that really kind of blew it wide open for me was, I'll walk you through pre-VisibleThread, then post-VisibleThread, was every single contract or solicitation that came through, either direct from the government or via a prime and service of a government contract, contained, section I, a whole bunch of FAR and DFARS flowdowns. And so what I needed to do was parse through that list and basically flag the ones that kept us up at night that needed to be flowed down to our sub-tiers. And I kind of had that two-sheet, two-screen dynamic. Here's the solicitation. Here's my internal FAR playbook. And I'm just kind of cross-referencing left and right. It would take hours, a little bit soul-destroying, as you can imagine. And so VisibleThread allowed me to actually parse through those FAR clauses very quickly and sort them into buckets. These are ones, mandatory flowdowns, recommended or potential conditional flowdowns, ones that we comply with and don't require a ton of attention. We don't text while drive, versus ones that maybe do give us pause. One other quick example, and I'll pause, is 52204-2 security requirements, anything dealing with classified work. We had an arm of the business that was cleared. We had an arm of the business that wasn't. We would frequently get classified flowdowns for non-classified work. Even just flagging that and then kind of supporting our subcontracts team. It was a huge time saver and really a risk mitigator as well. So it's a 1-2 punch.
Turn it just back to something you said, because this is one of those things that people outside of this industry don't understand the implication of the list of these Section I clauses and then all the other like administrative things that like you have to like read and understand. So, I obviously had to do that for the Federal Acquisition Service, to do that for DoD. So I had the GSA rules and I had the DoD rules. Occasionally we do things with other places that had state specific things that were also applicable. And so like my customer would have to tell me, hey, this one is particularly important to us. We're going to make sure that we cite this. And sometimes we'll like pull it out of I and put it on H and say like, this is extra special, that if you're going to be driving in a government vehicle, you have to wear a seatbelt. You have to like certify that it's an anti-drug and work environment with a poster and all of that administrative stuff. When the new entrants, whenever like the non-traditional companies are trying to get into the government space and they're complaining about regulation, at least half of what they're saying is, I don't know what any of this stuff means. I don't know why this is in here. I don't like, my lawyer somewhere is like, this is just going to be liability and onerous on us. And so like it's just really interesting to see like that was the implication for you. And we're just like, all right, we just got to, these are what the rule makers make, and we just put it out there. But like just the weight of all of that is the driving of behavior.
No doubt. And I would also just add to that, Chris, where at the time when I started using it, I was pretty inexperienced. I was not a FAR expert when I started doing that process, and kind of using the tech and that time savings allowed me to become a much better kind of practitioner. And I'm still no FAR expert. I don't know if anyone is just there. But it was a huge time saver. And even just going through that exercise of kind of structuring a search dictionary to sort those clauses, it took some upfront investment, but it really helped me understand the FAR and better collaborate with kind of my contracting officers or supply chain peers. So there's added value there too.
And there's good news that anybody who is a FAR expert, it just changed. So anything that
Yeah.
you say chapter and verse is, now it's all different. So it's worse. All right, so let's get into like what the software actually does, how you use it. Like, if I'm some random, some small business, that does ordinary consulting to some, ordinary business to business kind of thing, and somebody's like, hey, you should really like go after this new thing, and like you got to figure out where it is, where the opportunities are. Like, how would they choose VisibleThread, and then what would they do? Like, would they like upload a document? What's the how would you get started kind of thing?
Sure. Yeah. So it is a browser-based software application. So you have a login. We have a couple of different deployment models when we think about security. I won't go down that rabbit hole just yet. But yeah, it's software, browser-based. You log in just like you would log into your Gmail, ChatGPT, et cetera. And it is document analysis based. So you are choosing opportunities, statements of work, RFPs, contracts, anything that's PDF, Word, or Excel spreadsheet. You're uploading that into VisibleThread. We're actually working on a couple of SharePoint integrations as well to kind of reduce the download upload cycle. But you're choosing those documents that you want to slice and dice within VisibleThread. And then once you're in the platform, you're performing various roles kind of based on your function. So we mainly assist BD capture, bid and proposals, contract, supply chain, personas for the most part, some program management, some engineers, basically anybody that touches a bid, which is a large constellation of roles. And so, yeah, based on your persona and what you're trying to do and where you're at in the life cycle, we have various modules from just initial opportunity assessment to, like I mentioned, FAR, flowdown reviews. I need to create a compliance matrix. I'm a proposal manager. That's kind of all there for you. And then you can customize it accordingly based on that role. I was a contracts manager. We call them FAR or search dictionaries. I had a FAR dictionary, a DFARS dictionary. A proposal manager might have a requirement section L, section M type dictionary.
So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is my first touch with this, my first taste of it. Is it one of these modules, or am I jumping in and like using it to find the opportunity?
Sure. Yeah. So it succinctly, we call it a full kind of lifecycle RFP intelligence platform. So you can start at the top with opportunity identification. We have direct integrations with SAM.gov. You can filter, search, and pull any opportunity that's in SAM.gov. it's already in your VisibleThread environment. So that's where you would start. And then from there, you can get into, you can assess it, you can shred it, you can do technical alignment against past contracts that you have delivered against or are delivering against, and then moving into the proposal phase. And then that's an important clarification that you teed me up for there too. It's not a la carte. It's not, you know what, I just want to shred, so I'm going to just do that. You have access to the entire suite to perform that all the way up to kind of post-contract award there, post-work.
So now I'm going outside. Now I'm helping companies do, very bespoke acquisitions for the kind of for the office that I used to run. And for me, it's pretty easy to I know what the template is. I know where this line versus that line. I know when the changes are. It's a second language for me. There's probably industry people like me, but for the rest of the world, they open up this 117-page document and be like, "What is this?" So now, all the software tools that I use for my job, every single one of them has a summarize with AI button. And then, whenever the company's responding, they're like, can we use whatever the generative AI tools that we're using? Can we use it to do something to, populate a staffing plan or do pricing checks or do, authoring of solution stuff back. And so, everyone says, hey, this AI stuff is amazing, assuming you have your own subject matter expertise after it to make sure it's right. But I know you just mentioned that you're using versions of AI or LM or generative stuff inside of the tool. So how would that work, independent of just the company that's doing their own prep? What would the use of AI be inside of VisibleThread?
So we take a layered approach to AI. So there's multiple types of AI, but the big one that we hear a lot about is generative AI, GenAI, and then there's deterministic AI, which is 100% accurate. So the generative is that probabilistic, deterministic, 100% accurate. The reason I want to define that distinction is it kind of defines our approach to the software. There's good use cases for both types, and VisibleThread offers kind of both options there. So how would you use AI and VisibleThread today? So on the front end, you can use generative AI to, brief, interrogate a document. I'm a BD or capture manager. I need to just put together an executive briefing for my leadership team. What's the opportunity? What's just a quick summary of the requirements? What are the evaluation factors? Maybe what are some potential competitors? And before I would put together a 20-page or 20-slide PowerPoint, you can use GenAI to kind of slice and dice one or more portions of an RFP to generate that. So that would be part one. We can use generative AI to align an RFP against, I mentioned it earlier, kind of a corpus of past contracts, SALs, PWSs. Where have we done similar work before? Or VisibleThread, help me show alignment. We've done this before, but we haven't done this type of requirement before. Great AI use case. And then where we layer in more AI, but it's deterministic, it's not generative, it's repeatable, it's accurate, we will show you literally where in that documentation that requirement's appearing. So it's not just being conjured up out of kind of thin air. And then finally, moving more into, I'm a proud liberal arts major, into more of the writing, kind of crafting type work, using generative AI to help draft responses, cost volumes, basis of estimate, simple cover letters, and then maybe most importantly, teeing up that response, teeing up the large language model, that's the engine that does the writing, with collections of your own content. So you can point VisibleThread at past proposals. We think these are total winners. You can point it at any kind of document to help ground and contextualize your response. And that's where you can get in some good tone discussions as well. And then finally, on that writing path, once you have content on the page, also using generative AI to kind of help iterate, expand this, compress this, write this in the tone or the voice of an Air Force 4-star general or an SES at GSA, as opposed to a program manager, or even we have healthcare clients, healthcare customers, to an average cardiovascular patient. Great GenAI use case, which I can expand upon, but I'll pause there.
All right, so you just hit a nerve with me. Also, liberal arts graduate. So the people of my cohort, my friends who ended up in GovCon, if they were of the engineering background, they went into project delivery and they pretty much stayed there. They might get pulled into proposal management in some way for like, explain this, help me build a graphic, build something as a design. But the all of us who like did the liberal arts writing and thought stuff, we all ended up as proposal writers. Like that's like, it's the nights and the weekends for all of them to like, they're good at writing, but it's not the kind of writing that they want to do, because you have to also be compliant. You have to make sure that you hit the order of the words that you're like. So it's not the creative writing that you want. It just you're capable of producing it. So it is interesting to hear you say that this would do that, but in the flavoring of like what the voice of the customer would actually be versus like the soul sucking just production of 27 pages of a technical approach, but tailored to the Air Force. So that's a really good note.
Actually, if you're curious, Chris, I have one more good story. I think that also it's not as important as the bid writing is. Another writing example that I'm passionate about, where I think if I had generative AI at the time, I would have employed it. It was a little bit deeper into my contracts career. We had a big aircraft kind of MRO opportunity, and it was being audited by DCAA. And as you can imagine, DCAA, they're doing their job. They sent us dozens and dozens of questions and clarifications on the basis of estimate, the cost volume, all that good stuff. And it was a little bit of an art to translate aircraft, heavy maintenance engineers and program manager kind of jargon into, not that DCAA couldn't read it, but just more quickly understand how we arrived at specific costs to not only speed up the audit, but also increase trust with our DCAA partners. We're not trying to blind you with science. This is just how we got to the cost. I think it's a beautiful generative AI use case when we're thinking about audience, tone, author, connecting the author to the audience with just a different kind of bid and proposal use case. So it was a good example that I just was thinking about this morning when I was prepping.
So going back to the before VisibleThread, like before you did that, before you used it in your previous job, and now currently with like the anecdotes that you'll hear from customers, what's the immediate, oh man, this makes like my life so much better?
So generally it's hours, depending on the use case, the persona. I'll give you two examples. So we have way too many kind of customers who before VisibleThread or other similar type solutions, I am literally copying and pasting every single shall statement out of a statement of work PDF into Excel. Brutal. And so that would take hours. VisibleThread, you can get that done in minutes. On the contract side, kind of same idea. If you're dealing with, Polaris, Oasis, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 amendments, to RFPs, to statements of work, hours. I had one customer, they had 8 different contract amendments they needed to go through. They said using VisibleThread's dot comparison feature, it saved them 8 hours. So an entire working day. So the time savings really are compelling and liberating for our users.
So who's the buyer in this case? So like, we're saying this makes somebody's life in the proposal shop and the contract shop better. Are they the ones who are like, hey, we should really buy this thing, and then they're convincing their bosses? Or like, is it, people have used this from like company A to company B, and they're like, hey, we need to bring this back into us. Like, this is something that we use. Like, where does it come from?
Yeah, so I'll work backwards. I'm very proud of what I call the VisibleThread alumni base. Is we have a lot of VisibleThread users as they kind of just progress throughout their career and change companies. We see a decent amount of business that comes from referrals. I'm coming in, hey, do you guys have VisibleThread? If not, we need it. I actually have one. She's a senior proposal manager. She actually worked it into her interview. She said, I'm not going to join this organization unless you get VisibleThread, which was an amazing soundbite. So that's one avenue. So from kind of the end user up, from the top down, we generally see buyers from titles like directors of growth, VP of business development. My VP of contracts at the time was a buyer. So generally at that director or VP level, depending on the size of the firm, would be the buyers, generally from your BD growth contracts commercial shops would be your core budget holders.
All right. So it's now, 2026. The world of federal acquisition has changed. The scale of potentially the Department of War's acquisition budget is going up, and a lot of focus on things that are, commercial contracting, executive orders, and a real emphasis on like non-traditionals, like getting away from, the establishment of the Beltway bandits. So like I lived in the Beltway bandit phase. Like like it was, the companies had their names on the sides of the buildings, and that was the people who were bidding on the jobs that I hosted. Um, is it? Let me talk about more about what I see in the market dynamics.
Sure.
And tell me whether or not there are changes for you. Um, I could tell you which of the 4, 7 companies were going to bid on whatever job based on like my own knowledge of their corporate experience. And then all of a sudden, comes in and like everything gets knocked on its head. It's like, you know what, we should be dealing with venture capital startups. Like we should be dealing with companies that are, more product or software manufacturers directly instead of dealing with like somebody that does the integration side. Are you seeing that sort of shift on your side on like who's coming in and whether or not this VisibleThread is a potential tool for them, or is it still early and they're trying to figure out like their basic compliance kind of stuff to like get into federal acquisition?
Yeah, it's a good question. We still have that kind of core cohort of, I'll say, those traditional contractors. I will say we're starting to see some green shoots from more non-traditional shops. So maybe they're new to contracting in general, or it's just different types of products. Drone UAV type suppliers. We're seeing really interesting increased activity from that kind of market, obviously with what's going on in Ukraine. But yes, I'm certainly hearing a lot about from my users kind of even how they're tweaking their bid and their writing strategies is yes, compliance is table stakes, but really we need to clearly communicate innovation, lethality. So the messaging, I'm hearing a lot about how that's changing, and that obviously bleeds into just initial BD capture strategy as well.
Yeah. I'm also seeing there was a disruption early in 2025 around Doge and contract cuts. And so there was, every company has revenue goals, expectations for like, last year was this, and then next year we're going to be plus whatever. Last year wasn't that. Like it was a minus sign instead of a plus sign, which means the capture board. There's a bunch of things that are now coming out in 26 that like were either canceled or had modified in some way in 25. So the volume of jobs, basically everything got pushed. Like the volume of large acquisitions, which ordinarily would have gone out last summer, are now starting to go out like this spring, which means there's a higher number of industry partners that are interested in them because everyone's chasing everything. Like it's like all of a sudden, right? So what do they want now? Now that the new rules are in place, like can they keep going with the establishment? Are they going to be disruptive? Are they going to change the contract type? Like the intel around the jobs coming out in 26 are more. It's more different than any time I've ever seen. So to be able to have access to like anything you can get out of that would probably be really useful right now.
Yeah, and you nailed it, Chris. I know
Yeah.
a lot of the customers, and so I obviously we meet with our customers on a periodic, recurring basis, and I love meeting with my customers. I like to think they like to meet with me, but I'm getting more reschedules right now. Like we're just slammed, we're inundated with opportunities with bid work. We'll talk to you when the snow thaws. So yeah, we're certainly seeing that as well.
In terms of like the no, like types of acquisitions, so there was a big change. They were trying to kill a bunch of like new IDIQs. So like the contracts that have brand names that you mentioned earlier, like Polaris and Alliant and those things. There was a window last summer where like a lot of the big ones like we're not going to do this anymore. We're just going to have GSA do them. So like IDIQ formation probably declined for your customer base. But now it's opening back up. There's an Army acquisition called Maps that just opened back up. There was that Shield thing for Huntsville that just opened back up. Um, do you think the principal, I mean, obviously it does everything. Do you think the people who are tracking new opportunities are focused more on like actual task order, RFP, contract work versus like the master vehicles right now? Or is it just the world is just as crazy as it was before? And it's the same distribution of like what's the focus of acquisition right now?
Yeah, I think it'd be hard, Chris, to put my finger on the scale too heavily in either direction. I do think the non-traditional vehicle is interesting. I think maybe to tie it just back into how our business is operating, and I'll probably argue any software vendor in the space, is it is forcing, whether you're just going after those traditional IDIQs or I'm just going to go after, OTAs and SIBRs, is it is forcing software vendors to make sure that they're not being pigeonholed. So I'd say traditionally, VisibleThread, strong compliance matrix, kind of your classic traditional RFP or government RFP kind of procurement cycle and vehicles. And it led to, the compliance matrices and the comparisons and, acronym reports to make sure that acronym glossary looks good. And that's great. But now that the procurement structure is changing, or it might be changing for however long, it does force an innovation into, we need to get more into writing, opportunity assessment, bid intelligence to make sure that our users are armed with that intel to kind of craft their strategies appropriately. So lots of Sturm and Drang, but it certainly forced product redesign and in our business.
Does that mean that you could pick up things that are, an other transaction or a commercial solutions opening often has an anchor that's posted in SAM.gov, but it's not like the real thing. It's just like the initial post that says, hey, we're going to go do something, but the do something part is actually somewhere else. So there's, there are these OT consortiums. There's, different, particularly for the military, there's other transaction like entities that like are doing things like DIUs doing things for CSOs. So those things are present in VisibleThread, and you can find if it's going regular or to something like as an OT or a CSO there. You have that kind of intelligence.
Good question. So not to that level. So currently, the only direct integration kind of outside VisibleThread would be to SAM.gov. You can still upload opportunities from external sources. There's no direct integration, not yet. So I wouldn't go that far, but we very much think that once you get some of that, whatever form the documentation's in, getting it into VisibleThread, starting to slice and dice it, use that GenAI on top of just traditional kind of capture intelligence, we think we can help out there.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't criticism of the tool. There
No.
isn't a data source. Like there isn't a place where this stuff exists.
Correct.
And it's almost by design. So I don't know. I don't know if you can talk if you want to be negative about SAM.gov, but I hate it. Like it's so. When I was inside of government, I had a bunch of documents that had weird markings. First it was like for official use only or whatever, and it's now being organized under this thing called CUI, and the government then marks documents and then says, hey, like you just can't like give this out to anybody. Like there are some things that are out in the open, but most things like you're controlling it in some way. And then the contractor proposals, they always had this marking on the bottom about proprietary and like the use of the data. So like everyone's competitive landscape. No one ever wants to have their information shared to somebody else. Like that's where you get into protests and lawsuits between companies. And in like the last year, all of a sudden, there are these things popping up that are tools that are time savers. Like if I was still inside of the government and I could take your proposal versus your proposal and then say like summarize it for me. But I mean, that would be really fast. It'd be great. But then I'd have to I'd be uploading that document into some environment, and I'd have to know what the rules are and whether or not am I allowed to take company X's proposal and put it in this place. I know I can do it in my own document because it's my own, like it's something that I control the environment, but I can't just put it in into ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever else because they have to know what the rules are. So I imagine for VisibleThread, the same thing is occurring right now for you guys. Like there's primes and subs that are sharing information, and you're like, hey, where's this stuff going, and what are you doing with it? Am I like, are you using it to train to sell, or who? So that's the kind of question that I'm sure in order to sign up, you've got to be able to say, here's what we're doing, and here's how it's like controlled and safe and like reasonable to do. So can you tell me more about like what's happened in the last couple of months? Like what's that like?
Great question. We're hearing this a lot from our either potentially new customers who might want to purchase VisibleThread. We're also seeing it from our existing user base in terms of, hey, Kyle. So I have a story here, Chris. So I've had a couple of questions in the last 4 or 5 months from users saying, we've received queries, non-disclosure agreements, or even contractual clauses from our prime customers saying, you shall not use our proprietary information or ingest it into any kind of large language model that learns, trains, it can't form the basis of any kind of corpus of content that will then bleed into other people's content. And it's absolutely a rightful concern. And so with this boom in generative AI technology, large language models, there is a corresponding responsibility and requirement to understand what kinds of content you are putting into what kinds of technology. So my recommendations for anybody out there that's a user of this type of tech or is looking to buy it for their own organization is really understand what kind of models are being used. In general, you can have models that are it's called they're baked. They don't learn over time versus kind of learning or training models. They learn over time based on what you ingest and based on what it generates. Both kind of AI technology paths are valid. There's pros and cons to both. So you want to understand, where does the data go? Is it training this model, and can it influence downstream new types of content? And there are plenty of secure models out there that can live kind of behind your firewall that are baked. There's ways you can influence the output without kind of training the model. I kind of use the sins of the father metaphor there. So we're definitely hearing a lot about it. There is some data security risk there, but as long as you're asking those questions up front, get your IT and security teams involved early. I don't see that enough if I could kind of influence the buying cycle. So yeah, just really interesting. And then we actually, last thought here, VisibleThread itself is also receiving more and more data processing agreements from some of our customers. So it's taking on increased visibility, as it should. But you're going to start to see more of this. You want to start to have a plan, both from an IT and a contractual kind of posture.
All right. So a lot of people are worried about AI and like what the future is and whether or not like it's going to affect their career. Some people are excited about it, like it's time savings. I'm sitting here talking to you, thinking about like my career working at GSA, and like currently what I'm doing for my company, the ability to automatically like tell the distinctions between that and like what the signals are in the requirement. And as we're talking about this platform and what we're doing, I'm thinking, is this like that Babe the Ox versus the machine kind of metaphor where like I'm thinking, oh man, this might be coming for me. This, like I'm gonna have to up my game, because I'm gonna have to learn how to use these kind of tools to make me more efficient, because like if it can do like the shred of the proposal and show the distinctions, like like I said, I can do that really fast for like my old shot. I can't do that for everything. Like I can't do that for 1,000 RFPs. I can do that for like the one that I'm reading. So
I actually, maybe here's a question for you, Chris. We get questions all the time from our users, hey, do evaluators, does the government use VisibleThread? Are they using this kind of technology to review and vet our own responses that we know we are using tech to help do better, faster, all that good stuff? So I like the idea of kind of just getting a thought about your experience, which of course is deep and expert. So it's something like, in SaaS, we obsess over the user experience. You're coming to the table from the evaluator experience. Is there anything that kind of bid capture proposal teams do within proposal responses that drives you crazy, makes it harder for you to kind of review it? Do you think that's trite? Do you think that's interesting? I'm kind of curious, but I wanted to get your vote on it.
so I've probably evaluated over 1,000 proposals and quotes. I've done written evaluations, I've done oral presentations, I've done demos. I've been locked in the room for a month to do source selection. The initial answer for, do evaluators use software tools? The broad answer over the life of my career and presently is still no. Like it is, it used to be a binder, like a physical artifact. Now it's mostly electronic. But there used to be the information was controlled, like it's submitted to the contracting office. They're the ones distributing it to the evaluators. At the end of the day, it's being locked up in a cabinet. Like it was like physical security for it. There were tests, 10, 20 years ago, back when the idea of like JAD sessions where like everybody was on a computer and we're doing ranking. A lot of that stuff is designed by engineers where they want to have like, they want to put weights on things like technical is 40% and management is 30%. They want to make it like an ordinal measure for like automatically calculating it. And then quickly, the evaluator, the peoples that were doing that realized that type of finite percentage kind of thing actually invites protest. So they moved quickly away from like quantifiable things into subjective and adjectival, like subjective things, because it's easier to say this was highly successful, this was more effective versus like this was 27% more effective.
Yeah.
So the software tools 10, 15 years ago really fell out of the evaluation scheme. In the last 6 months, they have come back in. The government is being, inside of government being told, hey, use these tools. We're going to roll out AI. We're going to do things. Every agency is considering them. And I just saw, I think it was the Army. The Army at one Army location announced, we're going to be using Tool X. And my first thought was, using Tool X is a bad announcement. We're going to be using AI is a good, we're going to be using a tool. Naming the tool means every company will go buy that tool and then tune their proposal to that tool. So then you won't be able to get that differentiation that you're looking for. So the answer is still broadly no, but we are absolutely moving into a world where if you want to award things fast, they're going to be using these tools, and someday soon, and it might be a variety of them, but they're going to be using software tools in order to maybe do like competitive range determinations
Sure.
to like get you down to like a shorter number, because the formal evaluation process is as soul sucking as the proposal development process. Yeah, like read these words and then write a 100-page report is
Yep.
not the way that acquisition should be done. It's not the way that your like business to business, personal, like life buying decisions are done. So we do need to cut out a lot of the administration, and the software tools are the only way to do that.
Interesting.
Well, Kyle, this has been great. I was excited to do this one. I did learn a lot. And for anybody who's, like curious now, this is the Optimized Podcast by VisibleThread. I imagine on YouTube, you could probably click on the VisibleThread button or just search Google. But if you want to know more, obviously reach out to them, talk to Kyle, talk to me, and we will look forward to doing more podcasts with Optimize here every couple of weeks. So thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Chris.